He had to be moved to Naples because he was involved in something in Rio Grande. That's how I was. So I don't even know if there's a good person here.
So you go to Naples.
Well, the problem is you don't want to run into somebody who's just gotten someplace because part of what makes them good is they have a team. Somebody had surgery with Mellis and they said he's got an amazing team. It's like clockwork.
Did his team go with him?
That's the problem. Let's see, but we don't have to. I don't think we have to do anything. This month.
Listen, Diane, if you got to go there, you go there.
Yeah, no, we'll look around and we'll see. I told him, I said, maybe just go see somebody and see what they say about when is the best time to do surgery. Thank you.
Oh, okay,
Okay, here we go. Shabbat Shalom. Nice to see you all. Must be the season. Good Shabbos. And watch this. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותם בריתו ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם בריתו בין ובין אותי לעולם אותי לעולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם וביום השני שבת וינפש שבת ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בריאה גאווה לחיים. Blessing for Torah Study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. Okay, good Shabbos, everyone. We're a big group today. It's nice. More people here than follow me on Instagram, which is...
Their planes got canceled.
So, yeah. So... since we're such a big group, unless you feel like your comment is really quality, maybe we don't need it. All right. because we got a lot to get to. This is such a chock-full Torah portion, and I'm excited to show you something that I'm pretty sure you've never seen before. But maybe you have. But probably you haven't. So we're gonna deal today. First of all, before I tell you who we're gonna deal with, according to the Midrash, who are in the Torah, specifically Genesis and Exodus, who are the two Egyptian princesses? The two. Batya. So Batya she's not called Batya in the Torah. She's called the daughter of Pharaoh. In which book of the Torah? Exodus. She finds the baby Moses in the basket. So the Midrash comes and says her name is Batya. But the Torah just says the daughter of Pharaoh. Daughter of Pharaoh means princess of Egypt. Okay, so that's one. Who's the other one? Hagar, or Hagar in Hebrew. Hagar is also not called a Egyptian princess in the Torah. She's just an Egyptian maidservant, but Rashi calls her the daughter of Pharaoh. Now, why would the daughter of Pharaoh be a maidservant why would the daughter of Pharaoh be a maidservant to Sarah? Because in the scene where Sarah's abducted by Pharaoh, and then God comes to Pharaoh and really scares him, Pharaoh then gives all this stuff to Abraham, and that's when Abraham becomes very wealthy. Well, one of the things that he gives is his daughter, because essentially what he says is, this is in the Midrash, but what he says is, if you, Hagar, want to really know spirituality, you should go with these people. Because these people, there's something special to them, and that's how Hagar ends up with Sarah. So, my point is this. We have in Genesis an Egyptian princess, and we have in Exodus an Egyptian princess. And whenever you have two things like that, you want to say, what's similar about the two of them? And what's different about the two of them? And then, if you can figure that out, then you have something. Okay, clear so far? Okay, so in chapter 21 now of Genesis, we're going to start with verse 14. Chapter 21, verse 14. You see now this story about when Hagar is going to sort of go away from Sarah and Abraham. By the way, any Hagar fans here? You like Hagar? Yeah, okay. Because I think if you love Hagar, this isn't the right class for you. But you'll see. You'll make your own decisions. All right. Here we go, Norman. We're at right into the mic. Genesis chapter 21, verse 14.
Early next morning, Abraham got up and took bread and a water skin and handed them to Hagar, placing them and the boy on her shoulder. Then he cast her out, trudging away. She wandered aimlessly in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was all gone, she cast the child away under a bush. She walked away and sat down on the other side at a remove of about a bow shot, thinking, "Let me not see the child's death." There, on the other side, she sat and wept in a loud voice. God heard the boy's cry, and from heaven an angel of God called to Hagar and said, "What is troubling you, Hagar? Have no fear, for God has heard the cry of the lad where he is. Get up, lift the boy, and hold him with your hand, for I am going to make of him a great nation." God then opened her eyes, and she saw a well. She went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy to drink. God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became a bowman. He lived in the wilderness of Paran and his mother took him a wife from the land of Egypt.
Okay, so now let's go back. So what we're going to do now is going to be annoying, but we're going to go back to verse 15. Okay? But here's what I need you to do. Hold your spot there, because I want you to look back at these verses and other verses in Exodus back and forth, back and forth. So if you could hold your spot there, but also hold your spot in Exodus chapter 2, verse 3. So if you could hold, don't lose your spot on the page you're in. So there's things like bookmarks, put a pencil. There's ways this can be done. It's not the most, right. But so hold your spot there, but then go to Exodus 2, 3.
Exodus 2, 3.
Yeah. Anyone have the page and plow for 2, 3? 388. 388. Okay, now. Everyone have both, so you can look quickly at both? Yeah, okay. Now before we do that, just to remind you, if you look at the first Rashi on the source sheet, it says Rashi 16:1, who was Hagar? A handmaid, an Egyptian, but Rashi says from the Midrash, she was the daughter of Pharaoh. When he saw the miracles which had been performed for Sarah's take, he said, it's better, that should be steak. For Sarah's steak, he said, it is better for my daughter to be a handmaid in this house than be a mistress in another man's house. Okay, so we said that before. That's how the princess of Egypt becomes the handmaid of Sarah. Okay. Now, chapter 21, verse 14. Let's see, is that where? I'm sorry, 15. Okay, this is going to be tough. So, Judy, I'm going to read the Genesis verses and you read the Exodus verses, okay? So I'll tell you when. So the first thing we're looking at is Genesis 21:15. Okay, ready? And then you're going to read Exodus 2:3. Okay, so the water of the skin, my translation again is a little bit different because it's better. But the water of the skin was finished, and she cast off the boy beneath one of the trees. Okay, now, Exodus 2:3.
When she could hide him no longer, she got a wicker basket for him and caulked it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child into it and placed it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile. And his sister stationed herself at a distance to learn what would befall him. The daughter of Pharaoh came...
Wait. Was that just verse 3?
Oh, just 3?
Yeah, let's start again. Just verse 3.
When she could hide him no longer, she got a wicker basket for him and caulked it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child into it and placed it among the reeds of the bank of the Nile. Okay, so do you see that there are both... In each of these verses, there's a princess of Egypt and a boy. Now, the boys are both called Na'ar, which is interesting. Well, actually, Moses is called Na'ar. Ishmael, this is Ishmael we're dealing with. He's called the Yeled. And they're both cast off and hidden somewhere or placed in something. Okay, clear so far? Mm-hmm. Okay, now... The next verse, look now at, in Genesis verse 17. So we're 21:17. God heard the voice of the youth, and an angel of God called to Hagar from the heavens and said to her, what troubles you, Hagar, etc. Okay, but I just want you to hear, Vayishma Elokim et kol ha'na'ar, God heard the voice of the youth. Okay, now, Judy, verse 6.
Verse 6.
Verse 6.
When she opened it, she saw that it was a child, a boy crying. She took pity on it and said, "This must be a Hebrew child."
Okay, so here, who here in Genesis, God hears the voice, right? But in Exodus, Batya sees the problem of the boy. You see the difference? Which means that it's not necessarily Hagar that sees the problem, it's God that sees the problem. But with Batya, it's Batya that sees the problem. Okay, back to Genesis, verse 19. Then God opened her eyes, and she perceived a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and gave the youth to drink. Okay, Judy, verse 9.
Oh, you want to go to 9?
Verse
And
9.
Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will pay your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed it. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, who made him her son. She named him Moses, explaining, "I drew him out of the water."
Okay, so in verse 19 in Genesis, God opens her eyes, and only then, when God opens her eyes, does she see that this baby needs water to drink. But in Exodus, it's Batya who recognizes that this baby needs to be taken care of. You see the difference? Okay. Now, verse 20. In Genesis, God was with the youth and he grew up. He dwelt in the desert and he became a shooter and an archer. Okay. Okay, Judy, verse 10.
When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, who made him her son. She named him Moses, explaining, "I drew him out of the water."
Okay, so what you see here is, and it was that God, let me read this one more time. God was with the youth and he grew up. So the Hebrew there is vayigadel. But if you look also in Exodus, it says vayigadel. So this is better in Hebrew. But what we've done in each of these two verses is the Hebrew verbs are the same. Right? And when the Torah does that, it's making a very specific connection between these two stories. So if you had to ask, it looks a little bit more like Batya is taking better care of Moses than Hagar is taking of Ishmael. Okay. Now, we're going to go a little bit deeper into that. But one of the things that's powerful about that is Hagar is the biological mother. Batya is not. And even still, she's taking better care.
Because Hagar is living the nightmare with the child, not just observing it.
Okay. Interesting idea. What's the nightmare?
Not having enough water and about to die.
Okay. Very good. Okay. Other comments? Okay. Of course. Yeah. Well,
Okay, the child's a bow shot away, he grows to be a bow shooter. I hear war and bow shooter. The other child is in water. There's a metaphor of Torah. I'm steeped in it from the birth.
we're going to get to the bow shot. Yeah, we're going to get there. But yes. But Pharaoh, Egypt, Genesis. Pharaoh, Egypt, Genesis. Why does Hagar end up with Sarah and Abraham? Because Pharaoh, the one who knew Joseph, has a dream that terrible plagues are going to come to him, and he says, "I'm not interested in that." Jews can leave. Whereas Abraham and Sarah, you can leave. But later on in Exodus, the Pharaoh hears about the plagues and says, I'm not afraid of you, Jews can't leave. But he's the one who didn't know Joseph. So of course, everything in Genesis is a build-up for what's going to happen in Exodus. Okay, now let's look at verse 14. Back to Genesis, verse 14. So arise, lift up the youth, and grasp your hand upon him, for I will make a great nation of him. Okay, now if you look at the second Rashi, 21:14. Oh wait, I'm sorry, I read the wrong verse. 14. So Abraham arose early in the morning, took bread in a skin and water, and gave it to Hagar. He placed them on her shoulder and the boy, and sent her off. And she went and strayed in the desert of Beersheba. So the rabbis ask, okay, couldn't you just say she went to Beersheba? What do you mean she strayed? So look at Rashi on 21:14. She reverted to the idol worship of her father's house. Beersheba, south, towards the direction of Egypt. Egypt was known for being the den of idolatry. And she was sort of yearning back for idolatry. Okay? Now, on the other hand, if we think about Batya, why was she in the... So, Miriam and Yocheved place Moses in a basket. And they push him down the river. He's an infant. He's 3 months old. If you wanted to save a baby, is placing him in a basket and sending him down the river your first choice? Right? So why did they do that? Why place him in the river? Because they knew that one person would be there. And they knew that the one person would be there was like the only righteous person in Egypt that had any influence. And who's that? The daughter of Pharaoh. Now, why did she go to the river? Okay, so we have to go to the Midrash for that. But if you look at the third source on the sheet, why was Batya, or the daughter of Pharaoh, if you don't like the Midrash, well, if you don't like that Midrash, well, here, look at this Midrash. But why is she in the river? Rabbi Yochanan said, the third source on the sheet, she went down to cleanse herself from the idols of her father's house. She was going to the mikveh. Because her house that she lived in was full of idolatry. And the only way she could get away from it was to go purify herself in the mikveh. So she used to go to the mikveh all the time. Well, because she went so often, it was known that she was there. And Miriam and Yocheved said, boy, you know how we can get this baby to her? In the water. And that's what happened. So look, the rabbis say, Pharaoh's daughter was a leper. That is why she went to bathe. In other words, she had some sort of skin disease, some which you could get from boils, which is one of the plagues that the Egyptians got because of their idolatry later on. So she was a leper. That's why she went to bathe. When she touched the basket, she was cured. You know why there's so many hospitals called Mount Sinai? It's not, I mean, it's funny, but it's not a joke. At Mount Sinai, when the Torah was given, everyone was cured of their ailments. That's why hospitals are called Mount Sinai. Because Mount Sinai was a place of healing. Nobody who works in any Mount Sinai in this country knows that. I mean, maybe there are a few people who do. But that's why they're called Mount Sinai. Well, Moses is the giver of Torah. And so she touched the basket and her leprosy went away. So immediately she was drawn to the baby in it and had compassion and loved him right away and had a more love seemingly for this baby than Hagar had for her own son. At least that's what the Torah wants you to think and why it compares the Hebrew in the two stories in this way. Okay, clear so far? It's incredible, isn't it? Okay. All right. Now, Do you think that when Moses was up until the point that he was 3 months old, Moses' parents, I don't know why I'm getting that annoying. So annoying. I don't know why Moses' parents, maybe they didn't give him a name. Maybe they said, well, see, maybe someday he'll be found by an Egyptian and they'll give a name. We can't think of any names. But then she'll give a name and we'll go with that. Right? Because look what it says. That is why she had compassion for Moses and loved him exceedingly. Look down. If you looked in the story in Exodus, Pharaoh's daughter is the one who says, I drew him from the water, and she gave him an Egyptian name, Moshe. I pulled him out of the water. That's Egyptian. So what was his name for the first 3 months? They said, you know what? Let's just call him Baby. And then maybe, he had a whole bunch of names. He actually had like 8 names. Avigdor, Yekutiel, a whole bunch of them. I remember when I had my first kidney stone here in Miami. There've been a bunch, but the first one, I couldn't find a doctor. And then a urologist who accepted our insurance here, but then I went to Baptist and they did. And they had an Orthodox rabbi whose name was Yekutiel. That was his first name. And I saw, yes, fine. Turned out he was a little too frum for me. But he was all right. He was fine. But Yekutiel, to pull out of it, who needs someone to pull out a kidney stone? Who is perfect guy. But Yekutiel was one of Moses' original names. He had some other names too, Avigdor, etc. But think about this. Whatever name his parents named him, we don't use. We use the name that the Egyptian princess gave him. Why? Wouldn't we want to go with the Hebrew name that his parents gave him? Instead, we go with Moshe, the Egyptian name. It's a little strange. We'll get back to that later. All right. Now, you mentioned the bow. One of the things we see was that first, when we measure distance, we say Hagar was in one place and Ishmael was a bow shot away, which is foreshadowing. We talked about that. We did a whole class on that once. I don't know if it was 3 years ago or 6 years ago or 9 years ago. Couldn't have been 12 years ago. But I wasn't here. But the people in Fort Myers had a great lesson that week. So we learned about it. A bow shot was very not specific. You shoot it, you don't know exactly how far it's going to go, and that's a whole thing that had to do with Ishmael and the imprecision of idolatry versus the exact nature of how God could perform a miracle right on the dot and so forth. So that was one idea of Ishmael going towards idolatry, which is much more imprecise. However, later we see also that he becomes an archer. And so we ask the question, well, what does that mean? Now, first let's consider this, because the second Rashi is very important. She reverted to the idol worship of her father's house. Now, what does Batya do with Moses when she gets him? She realizes that he's Jewish. Why? Because he's circumcised. So she brings him back to the Hebrew, what do you call them? Maids, but the wet nurses. Brings him back to the wet nurses because Moses won't nurse from non-Jews. Because the Torah that's going to speak to God can't nurse from non-Jews. And she recognizes that. So she brings him back to Shifra and Puah, who the Midrash say are Miriam and Yocheved. And whereas Hagar leads Ishmael towards idolatry, Batya reinstates Moses towards monotheism. See the difference? Okay. Now, and how does that work out for Ishmael? So look at the fourth source on the sheet, Rashi on Genesis 21:20. So he dwelt in the desert and became an archer. What does that mean? He used to live in the wilderness and rob travelers. It is to this statement that refers that his hand shall be against everyone, right? Which we learned earlier. Okay. Now, clear so far? Okay. And then, she named him Moses. From here you learn the reward for those who perform acts of kindness. Although Moses has many names, the name that was set for him throughout the Torah was only the one that Batya, daughter of Pharaoh, called him. Even God only called him by his Egyptian name. God never called him Avigdor, Yekutiel, I forget what the other ones were, but there's the Midrash lists a whole bunch of what his Hebrew names were. They call him Moses. Okay, now, we don't get the name of Batya in the Torah. We only know that she's the Pharaoh's daughter who's in the water. What does Batya mean? Well, what is Bat? And is God, right? So this is a very generic name, but she's just called daughter of God. Okay, so look at the last source on the sheet. Rabbi Joshua of Sichnin said in the name of Rabbi Levi, the Holy One, blessed be he, said to Bitya, or Batya, whatever you want to say, daughter of Pharaoh, Moses was not your son, but you called him your son. So too you are not your daughter, but I call you my daughter. As it is stated, these are the sons of Bitya, the daughter of Batya, daughter of God, Batya. That's where Batya comes from, which is kind of neat. So there's something about Batya. So, who's Ishmael's father? Not your question. Abraham. Remember Abraham? All right. So Abraham and Hagar have a son named Ishmael. He's named Ishmael because God hears the call, right? God hears the call. So what we see from this perspective is Hagar is living in a home of monotheism. She comes from idolatry in Egypt, but she's now placed in the one home of monotheism that there is. She lives with Abraham and Sarah. And from that home, she takes her son Ishmael back to idolatry. She doesn't get it. On the other hand, Ishmael's father is Abraham. Abraham was the guy who lived in idolatry, but recognizes that there's one God and leaves it and goes towards monotheism. Look at the similarities between Batya growing up in the den of idolatry in Egypt and Abraham growing up as the son of an idol salesman in Babylonia. Batya is like Abraham. Hagar isn't. And so you could go through Genesis and ask the question, Hagar's pretty good. Why isn't Hagar? Why don't we say Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Leah, and Hagar? Why didn't Ishmael make it? And now you start to see how important it is that Hagar, or why Ishmael becomes such a problem, and it's because of Hagar. And then you ask the question, if Abraham's the good father in this situation, and Hagar's not, and Hagar leads him to idolatry, and now you can ask the question, how do you know if you're Jewish or not? According to halakha. It's your mother. It's based on your mother. And that's the lesson there. Why is it based on your mother? Now, hold on. I have more. There's more to that. Don't go crazy about that. But there is an indication here that you grow up and get your more. Now, today is different, but put yourself 3,800 years ago. You grow up and you're weaned and you get your morals and your ethical behavior more from your mother than your father. Jay?
If Hagar is so bad and Ishmael follows Hagar into idolatry, why does God make Ishmael a great nation? And last week you said, you showed us where it will be a nation of wild. And we have examples of people in idolatry not accepting it. Abraham and so Ishmael could have not accepted it, so why make him a great nation?
Okay, so, great just means large. It doesn't mean that they're that great. I think Indonesia is the largest country in the world. What's so great about that? Maybe they're okay. I don't know. You don't hear a lot of Nobel Prizes or Olympic winners coming from Indonesia. But it just means large. But there's another reason. There's another reason. So when Hagar finds out, let's see if I think I brought this. Hang on. Well, let's look at it this way. When Hagar sees that he's going to die, when Ishmael is, so thirsty and she can't take it anymore, and she's suffering too, like you said, which was a good point, and Hagar walks away, she starts crying. And she gets mad. And God comes to her and says, take it easy, enough. And then she opens her eyes, and all of a sudden, he's got water and he's going to be okay. But when she sees that the promise that she got that he was going to be great is fading, she abandons him and goes away and starts crying. Abandons him, leaves him under the tree. What's the whole purpose of that story? Because God also promises Abraham that from Isaac you're going to have a great nation. So Abraham thinks this is great. I'm going to have a great nation too. But then God says, kill Isaac. And what does Abraham do? Does he go away and cry? No. Okay. He davens. But not only does he not go away, you have to see it to believe it. So let's look now. Let's go back. By the way, all of this story with Hagar is the preface to the Akedah. Everything that we're looking at now, how Hagar deals with Ishmael, is that little story that doesn't seem as important that leads up to the Akedah. So look at chapter 22, verse 1. Genesis 22. It's the next chapter there. So let me just read it quickly to go through it. And it happened after these words, God tested Abraham, and he said to him, Abraham, he said, here I am. And he says, everything's going great. We're going to have this big nation. Please take your son and slaughter him. Oh, verse 3. So Abraham arose early in the morning. Why do you rise early in the morning? Because if God tells you to do a mitzvah, you go and do it. You don't go somewhere and cry about it. That's what Abraham did. He took two young men with him, and Isaac, Beno, his son. Points out specifically his son. He split the wood for the offering and got everything ready. On the third day he saw them. Okay? And then look at verse 5. Vayomer Avram el Narav, shvu lechem po im achamor. Abraham said to Ishmael and Eliezer who were there, you two stay here with the donkey. Ani va'anahar nelcha adko. V'nishtachava, we will worship together. V'nashuva, and we will return. Everything's we, me and him, we're together. Vayikach, okay. And Abraham took the wood for the offering and placed it on Isaac, Beno, his son specifically. They speak to each other. They're having a conversation. This is like the only time in the entire Torah that they actually have a conversation. And then the end of verse 8, and the two of them went together. So what and every time it refers to Isaac, it says Yitzchak. Yitzchak, 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 Beno, 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 together, 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 we. That's not French, that's the two, that's we, me and him. Right, we're together. Everything, ever since the moment that Abraham finds out you're going to sacrifice Isaac, he's with him, his son, Isaac. Whatever God wants to do, we're going to do it. Even though he also had that promise, your people are going to be like the sands of the sea and the stars of the sky. But he's my only son. Ishmael didn't work out. What are you talking about, sands of the sea? But Abraham doesn't complain. Whereas Hagar goes in the corner and cries about it and leaves Ishmael to die under a tree. So now that we saw that, you have to take a look at this. Come back with me to, where is it? Okay, back to chapter 21. Verse 1. I'm just trying to find the right section that I need here. Thought it was. Hey, bear with me. Okay. Okay. So yeah, if you look. Let's start at verse 9. 21:9. The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, mocking. So she said to Abraham, drive them out, and so forth. Okay. 11. The matter distressed Abraham regarding his son. So God said to Abraham, be not distressed over the youth, etc., etc. So look, Abraham arose early again, right, in the morning, took bread and a skin of water, gave them to Hagar, placed them on her shoulder, and the boy, and sent her off. Notice, before we had Isaac. Here, you don't see the name Ishmael. You just see the boy. And sent her off. And she went and strayed in the desert of Beersheba. And that's where she took him to go do idol worship. Right? We saw that before from Rashi. The water of the skin was finished, and she cast off the boy. So this is back to Jay's question. Abraham takes Isaac to be his own. Hagar, listen closely. Abraham takes Isaac to be his own. We, Yachtav, together. Hagar casts off the boy. And never again do we hear the name Ishmael. Whereas in that whole section, if you went through the other section we just read, you see Isaac. Here you don't see Ishmael at all. Okay. She went and sat herself at a distance, some bow shots away, for she said, let me not see the death of the child. Not my son, not Beno, not Ishmael, the child. And she sat at a distance, lifted her voice, and wept. God heard the voice of the youth. So Abraham calls out and cries to God. And they go and pray. Here, Hagar doesn't pray at all. She just goes and cries and complains. Who does God hear the voice of? Not Hagar, Ishmael. Right? God heard the voice of the youth. Shouldn't the mother be crying for him? She's not. And an angel of God called to Hagar. And that's when God said, Hagar, don't you see what's going on here? With Abraham, I didn't have to worry about this. Abraham always saw what's going on here. Why do I have to show to you that your child is suffering? Because she doesn't see that. She only cares about her own suffering. So why do we not see the name Ishmael? Well, what does Ishmael mean? God heard my voice. She's now taken Ishmael and brought him back to idolatry. She forgot why he was named Ishmael. And because she forgot why he's named Ishmael, we don't hear the name Ishmael anymore. Right? Incredible. Incredible. Okay. So what does that mean? If she forgot what Ishmael means, how did she get Ishmael in the first place? Because she prayed for it. She davened for it. She was living with Abraham and Sarah and was behaving the way you were supposed to behave in a monotheistic home, and she was davening. But here, she's gone back to idolatry. She stopped davening, and God doesn't hear her voice anymore, so there's no point in calling him Ishmael anymore. That's not his name to her anymore. That God doesn't exist to me anymore. Whereas Batya, on the other hand, has a totally different approach. Right? Batya is trying to get away from idolatry, and Hagar is running back towards idolatry. Okay. Okay, what else I want to show you? Okay, so now we ask a couple of questions. If you would look at, if you did the same comparison that we did between the verses in Exodus and the verses of Genesis, comparing Hagar to Batya, if you did the same comparison between how Abraham deals with Isaac and how Hagar deals with Ishmael, you see in those verses the same words. You see the same Hebrew. Meaning that it was written in a way that it was meant to bring out the comparison. So the Torah is very specifically wanting you to pick up on the difference between Batya later on and Hagar here, and also Hagar here and Abraham at the Akedah. Okay, that's what we have so far. Okay. I just want to show you one more verse, well, on each side. So if you look now, by the way, one of the main important points that Exodus and Rashi, the Midrash and Rashi bring out is don't underestimate that Hagar was taking Ishmael back towards idolatry from the home of Abraham and Sarah. Whereas, and Hagar is, let me say it a little clearly. Hagar and Batya are both Egyptian. Everything here is a setup for Exodus. When the Jewish people get to Egypt, and they're slaves for 210 years, Abraham was originally told they were going to be slaves for 400 years. They leave after 210 years, and God doesn't fulfill that promise that he said to Abraham that he's going to leave in 400 years. They leave after only 210 years because they become so steeped in idolatry. And if they would have stayed there anymore, they would have reached the 50th level of impurity, and they would have ceased to be recognized as Jews. So God says, I've got to take them out early. So like if you're ever in like a really bad state, like if you're in like a hospital and you're not feeling well, just start worshiping idols like crazy to the point where and then God will save you. Right. I heard another joke about that, but it's controversial though, so I can't say it. But it's really funny. I'll save it for the hub. Okay. We're painting a clear distinction between the Jewish home and the Egyptian home. Getting it?
I understand what you're trying to set up, and it makes sense. But as a woman,
What about going back to Abraham and Sarah's home and submitting to Sarah's will, like God told her to do? That's the other option. Because what happens is, Hagar is a very good maidservant. That's not true. Well, because of her behavior. But Hagar is very revered in the home of Abraham and Sarah. Sarah is the one who says to Abraham, marry her, have a child with her. But then the Torah tells us she has the baby, and Sarah becomes lighter in her eyes. And she starts acting like she's more spiritual and closer to God than Sarah. At that point, Sarah says, enough. But then Ishmael also is worshiping idols. The Torah says mocking, but that's what it means. And Sarah says, I can't have this kid worshiping idols in our home around Isaac. They're out. So then she runs away, and God in the Torah says to her, go back and submit to Sarah's will. But instead of doing that, she goes towards the direction of Egypt, Beersheba, and starts worshiping idols. So she has challenges, no doubt, but she also makes a lot of mistakes. Jude?
What you're saying makes sense to me. Verse 22, where
Which chapter? 21?
21, verse 22,
Ah, yes.
where you take your son, your only one.
Oh, chapter 22. Wait, where are you?
Chapter 22, verse 2.
Oh, okay.
Take your son, your only one, the one you love. Where God is saying that to Abraham, where Abraham, you know he had two sons, but God is saying, this is your only one.
Well, so here's how the conversation goes according to the Midrash. God says, please take your son. And Abraham said, which one? I have two. And he says, your only one. Well, I have two. I have one with Sarah and one with Hagar. That could be either one. Whom you love. I love them both. Isaac. That's the conversation. Because Abraham doesn't get it until, when he says, take your son, Abraham doesn't know who he's talking about. Your only one. I don't know which one you're talking about. The one you love. I love them both. Jesus. Isaac. We'll get to Jesus later. In about 1,300 years. Michael?
Your comment always comes up. I learned this section, but I'm kind of small as from Michigan. Hello, everybody. And I learned with Rachel Turkovich the Exodus, and the same tension that comes up always comes up in the story. How do men read this? How do women read this? And how do you behave in it? If you look at the situation that Rabbi Barris is bringing, there's three situations. The first one, you have Abraham and Sarah on one side, right, and then Hagar on the other. So it's a man and a woman, and then a woman on the other side. So that's the dynamic, right? When you have the Akedah, there you have just men. And when women read this, it's just dysfunctional women, right? It's just how it is. Finally, Exodus. Now what we're going to, what is it? It's women from every echelon of society, right? You have the princess. You have Moshe's mother and sister, you have the midwives all working together, and the women working together, and on the other side is just Pharaoh. So in fact, your reaction to
Power of numbers there. The power of numbers who join together in sisterhood.
yeah, but it's all foreshadowed by the first thing that happens here, which is God says, everything that Sarah says, listen to her. Because we're told that the women that are more connected to reality, to top list, to life, actually have higher prophecy than the men. And that as time goes on, the women's prophecy rises up. It's true. So what you're seeing, and your reaction actually, God understands, God's leading to it. And finally, what we finally get is the women throughout society work together during Moshe, and then at the end, the women's prophecy rises above men's prophecy. You know what I mean?
Okay, so one more question, then I want to wrap this up and show you what it's really all about. As opposed to, whatever this is. Right. Yeah.
In Islam, Abraham takes Ishmael to be sacrificed. And they have a whole
Yeah.
holiday based on that interpretation.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. Okay, now, I just want to show you two more sections. Let's go back now. After Hagar takes him back towards idolatry. If you just look with me now, Genesis 21, 20. 21, 20. We'll wrap this up here, and hopefully this will make sense now. By the way, you see that parenting's important? You see? That's kind of the point of this whole thing. But Hagar takes Ishmael back to Beersheba, meaning in the direction of Egypt, back towards idolatry. And then we don't know anything about the youth of Moses and Ishmael. They both go from being a child to an adult in one verse. There's a verse for both of them that says, and they grew up. Okay, that's it. They grew up. So let's look at both of them. 21:20 said, God was with the youth and he grew up. He dwelt in the desert and became a shooter and an archer. Okay, now what does it mean to become a shooter and an archer? Look back to the source sheet just to review the third Rashi from the bottom one more time. He used to live in the wilderness and rob travelers. I mean, even if you don't like the Midrash, something was wrong with him. He became an idolater. He married idolaters. And we don't have Abraham, Ishmael, and Jacob. He's out from the Jewish line. He rebounded in his second career. Okay. But he's out. She took him to idolatry. He became an archer. And instead of taking care of people, he robbed people and shot arrows at them and became a bad guy. Clear so far? Okay.
It's a clarion call for early childhood education.
Okay. All right. We're already past 10 o'clock. All right. Now, chapter 2 of Exodus, verse 10. 2:10. This is the last verse of the day. Chapter 2, verse 10. Of Exodus. 2:10. I'll read it if you don't feel like schlepping for it. All right. What page?
388.
388. Same page the verse was on before. A lot of the verses tend to end up on the same page year after year. All right. Chapter 2, verse 10. Vayigdal hayeled. Vayigdal, good, so small. Vayigdal hayeled. So again, we have his entire childhood in 2 words. Just like Ishmael grew up after being taken to idolatry, he then turns into a robber who looks to hurt other people. Moses is raised by Batya and is restored to monotheism. He grows up. She brought him to Pharaoh's daughter. Pharaoh's daughter is the one who cares about monotheism and not going towards Egypt. She wants to get away from Egypt. And now, all of a sudden, she names him Moses. That's the name we go with. There must be a reason why. Verse 11. Sometime after that, all right, in other words, at some point after he sticks around with Batya, he doesn't become an archer who shoots people. Vayar b'sivlotam. For the first time in his life, he sees the suffering of others. You see the difference? That's it in a nutshell. That's the whole story. You're supposed to say, oh my God, I can't believe it. I waited all week to show you the difference between he shot arrows and Moses saw Vayar b'sivlotam. He saw their suffering. Because Batya understood monotheism and stood against everything that Egypt, where she was from, stood for. But she was that one person who understood monotheism and goodness. She was able to lead Moses to a life of caring about other people. But because Hagar couldn't get away from Egypt, even when she was brought out of Egypt, even when her own father told her, get out of here, it's not good here. Even when Abraham and Sarah tried to teach her what it means to care for other people, she couldn't get away from Egypt. She went back to Egypt. She brought her son to Egypt. She forgot. For a moment, she was good. For a moment, she named her son Yishmael. And she said, I'm interested in learning about this God. But she couldn't hold on to it. And as soon as there was a little bit of adversity, she went back to idolatry and led her son towards idolatry and then towards becoming a criminal, basically. Consider Moses. Consider Abraham. Abraham, at 75 years old, leaves Babylonia, comes to Israel, has a famine. His wife is abducted, goes to war. His nephew's abducted, goes to war again, told his son is going to die, and never once turns back towards idolatry or towards Babylonia. And so, you're either going to stick with God or you're not, through thick and thin. But if you do, then you're going to lead a life where you care about other people. And if you don't, and you turn toward idolatry, you're going to end up like Ishmael, and people are going to forget your name in the first place. Okay, Shabbat Shalom.
Good message.
Check, 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 check. Check, 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 check.